Actually, guys, can you give me 1 minute? Can I take that call?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Mike and I are ready to do this podcast with Gerald, and he walks away. Too big, too important for talking to Mike and I. I get it. It's good to be the Gerald, I guess, but...
All right, sorry about that.
No problem. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Squat Cobbler. This is Kelly at KELLYTHUL on Twitter and Instagram.
And I am Dr. Mike at Official Pagan on everything.
So, gang, I never thought that I would do this podcast, but I have no choice based on the article that I've read. So, the title of today's podcast is Pete Townshend is a Nope. And so...
Now, wait. Before you go any further, I left the door open for you to do it, and you didn't do it. Now's the time. Before you go
all right, fine. Go ahead.
Like, subscribe.
Yeah.
Make sure you hit your notifications. All right, sir. Continue.
Yeah. So I recognize we've lost all the ardent Pete Townshend fans at this point in time. But for those of you who are remaining, please do like and subscribe for us on YouTube or any other platform of your choice. We really would greatly appreciate it, and thanks for listening. So, Mike brought to my attention, recently an article was published on blabbermouth.net interviewing what had been one of my all-time favorites, Pete Townshend. I'm a big Who fan that's been established in past Squat Cobblers and have always really enjoyed, I think Pete's a brilliant songwriter, but at least in his older years, turning out to be a pretty horrible person, in my opinion. The gist of this article is he's kind of glad that John Entwistle and Keith Moon are dead. And he doesn't really like Roger Daltrey all that much either. It was kind of one long, get off of my lawn, you kids, interview. And so I'd like to thank Mike for sharing that with me and crushing one of my heroes for me at this point in time. But when you read this little treasure, what was your reaction?
So, first off, for anyone who doesn't know, Blabbermouth is a hard rock and metal oriented music site. It is actually the most read hard rock and metal music site in the world. They had taken, so I've been reading more stuff about the Who since I've delved deeper into the Who than I had before because of Kelly's recommendations. So I have a bigger appreciation for them now. So I saw something about the Who, so I was like, oh, let me check this out. And it caught me off guard, and I thought it was going to be something like, so basically he did an interview promoting air quotes question mark the band's upcoming album, and he did an interview, I believe it was on a radio station. So Blabbermouth wrote an article about the interview and the impending backlash that I'm sure is coming. I didn't read the comments after the article. So like Kelly said, he basically said that he was glad that they were dead. I thought it was going to be something like, because they wouldn't be able to stand the state of the music industry today or something like that. Like I kept waiting for that other piece of it that never came. That silver lining thing, like they're better off because things are terrible now or something. It's like, no, just I'm glad they're not in this band anymore.
Yeah, it's an interview dripping with self-importance, arrogance, amazing dismissiveness to individuals that just, I found stunning. Because what I would argue, in the middle of the article, he's like, well, they never created any bands, and they never did this, and they never did that. I'd asked Pete, I'm sure he's a big squad, he listens regularly, to reflect on how successful were Pete Townshend's solo albums versus the full Who albums when you had that full crew prior to Keith passing. What has he ever produced that approached, the magic? And this was the thing that just really bothered me the most, is what I truly loved about the Who was 4 completely different individuals who don't have to like each other and didn't like each other particularly, but they all brought something unique to the table to create something magical. Keith Moon's out of control machine gun drumming, John Entwistle's bass playing like nobody has played the bass before. Roger Daltrey seems built to sing Pete Townshend songs. and just can put a lot of emotion behind them. And then Pete, a fantastic guitarist, but not like your Jimmy Page, Stevie Vai, kind of shred, kind of amazing guitarist, but kind of mostly a rhythm-based guitarist who was able to snake through what Entwistle was laying down, what Keith Moon was laying down, and collectively to create a tremendously powerful sound. And collectively, I thought it's really, really great stuff. And for him to kind of start to complain about, well, thank God Entwistle was gone because we started playing shows without him, and now I finally had a job again. And to talk about Keith Moon didn't keep time, and I had to keep time. All of those pieces are the things that made the Who sound, to me, unique and powerful and fantastic. And here he is bitching about it.
Yeah, and particularly the comments about, what did they do outside of the Who? So my initial reaction was the same as yours. Like, I'm not super familiar with giant Pete Townshend records that aren't Who related. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Again, not as well versed as you, so I figured you would know more about that than I would. But then as I thought about it, I thought, is his insinuation then that the Who records are basically just his records that they got to play on? Like, was the insinuation not that he was a better solo artist, or that the Who records are basically Pete Townshend records, not Who records?
Yeah, I think you might be on to something, and I quote from the article, Pete says, I think my musical discipline, my musical efficiency as a rhythm player held the band together. That I do think, now obviously he was the main writer, and you can't discount that, and that he created, the framework for this stuff to go in. But without an Entwistle bass, without a Keith Moon drumming, those are good songs, but they become great songs when you pull, and Roger singing as well. When you pull all these together, you get something very, very special. But it does seem to be Pete in his later years going like, yeah, it was all me. I mean, I carried these guys. And that's probably the most offensive thing to me, is that you can pretty consistently look across the web and see when people talk about some of the greatest bass players in the world. Entwistle's always in the conversation. Greatest drummers in the world. Keith, unique, very unique style, but always in the conversation. And so it just seemed very, very odd that, and, I'm kind of sort of hoping he was doing it as a joke or to provoke a reaction. But, I mean, there's always been kind of hints that he's a pretty big fan of Pete. Pete's a pretty big fan of Pete. And maybe as he gets a little bit older, he's even bigger. The most stunning part of the article, though, occurred at the end. And as we began to chat back and forth in our hours and hours of preparation for these shows, you brought something up that I think is worth noting, and I don't want to steal it, because I think you picked up on probably the greatest irony of this entire interview. So I'll turn it over to you.
So at the end of the interview, he went on a little rant that they summed up in there, of him basically dismissing the current incarnation of the Who, saying it's not a real band, that they haven't been a band in years, that they're not a real band anymore. They're just out there playing the Who kind of thing, and that they'll never do anything again, followed by the release date of their new album. Because again, the purpose of this interview was to promote the new Who album that's coming out in December, which is just titled Who. So his bashing of his own band, the classic lineup of the band, his disgust of the singer of the band, still the singer of the band, and then his completely dismissive remarks on the current lineup of the band, that they're not even a real band, and says they never will be again, followed by, oh, but our album comes out in December.
Yeah, and I'm doing this interview to promote it. Nice job, Pete.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a head scratcher for me. It just, what's the point? Why would you unleash all of this stuff? And, and it's just, I just think he, to a certain degree, has to be looking for a rise out of people, because he throws out other little gems like, quoting from the article again, usually I'm so unaffected by death. My mother, my father, Keith Moon, which is a sentence I never thought I'd hear, but okay. It's like, thanks for sharing. I just don't get it.
I mean, do you think he's just trying to stir up controversy? Because I mean, again, this was an interview somewhere else, then it was picked up by Blabbermouth, and I don't know how much you follow music sites that tend to be hard rock and metal oriented, but if you make it on a Blabbermouth or Brave Words or one of the big ones like that, dozens of smaller sites will just cannibalize this and repost. So was he doing it just to promote the new Who record?
It's complete speculation at this point in time, but it seems like a reasonable assumption because the Daltrey Townshend version of The Who did The Wire, their, I think, only release as a kind of Daltrey Townshend configuration calling themselves The Who. It was actually some pretty good stuff, but I don't think it really blew the doors out on sales and didn't get a whole lot of attention. And I think there's been awareness that this one's coming out for a while, and there's not really been a lot of buzz about it. And so this is certainly a way to create conversation because he seems to be really poking the bear a lot. I think it could be calculated to say this is going to get the name, back when I'm saying these kind of outlandish things, that's going to get picked up. People are going to talk about it. Obviously it worked. Blabbermouth picked it up, and it gives them the potential for more sales. So I got to think that was in the back of his mind.
Yeah, I personally, and again, I'm not nearly as well versed in The Who as Kelly is. I don't know Pete Townshend. I don't know very much about him or their history, especially compared to Kelly and, serious Who fans. I would think, if I had to guess, to some degree, he has to be thinking, well, if nothing else, this is going to sell some records, like Kelly said. Also, too, I would think maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe he was like, I'm going to say something that's going to stir some squirrel up and, get people talking about The Who again. But also it's a good opportunity to vent a few things, maybe about our singer and things like that I do feel. But, under the guise of stirring up controversy for the record.
Talk to your therapist next time, Pete. If you have these things, these parts, it doesn't need to be in a Rolling Stone interview. It can be in something else. But fortunately, this topic tends to come up on a Squat Cobbler or two. It wasn't that long ago that Mr. Townshend had all of his computers confiscated from his house and was accused initially of purchasing child pornography. And he was basically dead in the water. Nobody was stepping forward. He had an explanation, and nobody was buying it, and there was a lot of stuff going on. Fair to point out that Scotland Yard cleared him of any charges. He's never been charged with anything. But during that time when, the photos are of the police hauling out Pete's computers from his house, the only person that stood beside him was Roger Daltrey. And then to kind of kick some dirt on Roger, I don't know. It's hubris in the greatest degree to me.
Yeah. And I don't know. So I have no idea what size venues The Who are playing right now, or this incarnation of The Who are playing right now. I'm going back a little while. There was a Who show in Philly that was not at a particularly large venue. So I do wonder, how much, like we kind of already touched on, how much of this is to stir up controversy, how much of this is to get attention. There's a band, I'm not going to mention them because it's just going to sound like I'm saying negative things about them, because we had a run-in with one of their members once, a former member. We have no problem with the band themselves, but I don't want people to think this is related. So there was a band who at one time they've always been respected, but at one time were selling a lot of records and were really major figures and major players in metal. And it kind of cooled off, in part because of shifts in lineup and sound and their overall image and things like that. And they reunited the sort of classic lineup of the band, and it barely got any notice at that point because the name had kind of been worn down so much from the different lineups and misfired tours and records that didn't perform as well. So there just wasn't the fanfare you would think for reuniting the classic lineup that had sold tons of records and played big venues and toured the world and all that kind of stuff. So the record that they put out, and I'm going to give myself away here, but they put out a record that really stunned, and not in a positive way, critics and fans. And it was such an enormous departure from anything that they had done before that it was almost, I would say, defiantly so a departure, in a way that, to me, like, my takeaway from it was that wasn't an artistic choice on their part. They wanted to make people hate the record. They wanted people, because people did. There was an instant backlash, but that backlash from their core fan base was everywhere. There was every single day, every rock and metal site was posting the negative reviews, the YouTube comments, YouTube clips of fans losing their minds about how this band is destroying their legacy. So it went from you barely ever heard about this band, even their reunion barely got a flutter, to this air quotes terrible record that they put out was the talk of every music site that's even vaguely rock oriented for months, every day. To me, that was a calculated move on their part. I believe that they set out to make a record that sounded the way that it did. It was meant to put people off and get people talking about it. So I more and more would fall on the side that maybe that's what he's doing. And like I said, I'm not super familiar with the Who. I don't know where they're at right now with their careers. I do know that an incarnation of the actual Who, not like a tribute band or anything like that, a while back came to Philadelphia and played not our largest venue here. It wasn't like a bar, but it was not one of the bigger venues here though either. So I wonder is that what they're trying to do?
Yeah, because when even Kenny Jones, when after Keith had passed, they were still filling major auditoriums. And I think this current incarnation, so Entwistle continued to tour after the Who basically had broken up at that point in time. And he was not hitting major venues above a bar, but not hugely above a bar. And I think they're starting to slide into that same kind of venue side. And I do think that this could be an attempt by Pete to kind of say, hey, I want to be the big ticket in town again. So I want to kind of pull together some kind of key facts related to this episode so far. First of all, the band that Mike's talking about is Hanson. That's number one. Two, Mike has never had computer equipment removed from his house by police officials.
It's true.
And three, Pete Townshend in his current state is a nope. So these are my big takeaways for this episode.
They are. I have no problem with Hanson whatsoever. I'm pro Hanson.
Yeah, I think the Pagan Hanson feud is well documented. I think you can deny all you like.
I would never want to give this band publicity in any. They're not getting the Squat Cobbler bump. After this episode, I'm going to tell you about a band that we did have a real feud with that is as ridiculous as if we had a feud with Hanson.
I'd like to try and kick up a Squat Cobbler feud with Hanson. I think that would.
Hey, Hanson guys. I actually don't mind Hanson. I really don't.
I don't either. I just want to pick a fight with him. I just think it'd be
I have
fun.
Nothing negative about Hanson.
So our dream episode will be Donald Trump and Hanson on Squat Cobbler.
Donald Trump and Hanson. Just a debate.
Is Pete Townshend a nope or not?
Come on. But yeah, you were mentioning Entwistle going on playing smaller venues and things like that. When the Who were here, they played one of the theaters here. So it wasn't like a club, but it was nowhere near, a large scale concert venue.
Yeah, I think under kind of current incarnation and even towards the very latest time, because it's when John Entwistle was still around, he actually passed before they did the first show at the Hard Rock in Las Vegas. I think they had gotten to the point where the only places they were going to, but even, the Hard Rock in Vegas isn't a massive auditorium. It's good sized and do that, but I think they were starting to kind of fall into the mode where they just weren't going to fill up major stadiums anymore, which is...
Oh, yeah, this was a venue that was nowhere near stadium size.
All right, I've unburdened myself. I feel a little better. It was Hanson, folks. It really was. But there will be the Squat Cobbler Hanson feud, if nothing else. We're gonna make that happen. Start. I assume they have a Twitter handle or something. We could just start calling them out.
Hey, Hanson. They're gonna be like, who the hell are these people?
Anytime, anywhere. Come on, bring it.
What's funny about it too is I like Hanson. There's nothing. I mean, I don't follow their careers or anything like. But I have nothing against them. But I'm ready to start this feud.
Yeah, it just feels right. It does.
It does. And it's weird because I have nothing against them. But yeah, I'll get involved in this feud.
Yeah, too bad. Yeah, that's the way it goes. Well, I think on that note, Mike and I will retire to begin to discuss methods to begin our war against Hanson. So with
War on Hanson.
War on Hanson. Which would be a good title for this episode, but we have a different one, so we're gonna use that. So, as Mike caught at the beginning of the episode, I'd like to remind again: if you get an opportunity, we would greatly appreciate it if you would like or subscribe to YouTube if you consume our content that way. iTunes, blogs, Stitcher, whatever your platform of choice is to consume podcasts. Please like and subscribe. We would greatly appreciate it. And thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, I'm going to stop the broadcast.